for Countryside Adult Home capital improvements. And okay, and maybe we can bring B to the floor at the same time. Request to increase the capital improvement capital account to the amount of 215,000. Okay, brought to the floor by Supervisor Thomas, second by Supervisor Runyon, and Supervisor Bruno, please speak to this.
Sure. The reason for this increase is the unforeseen conditions which amounted to some deteriorated structural components that you couldn't see until you got into the work. So with that, there's an increase in engineering, small increase in construction inspection, that's the TI here on 3D down at the bottom, and actual construction. So that is the reason, if you will, for this increase.
Okay.
Question?
Everybody clear on this then? Okay. Good. I'll call the question for items 3A and B. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We will return to item 2 for items to be discussed from the county administrator. County Administrator Taflin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being late.
No problem.
Item 2A, the journal report of transfers from the county administrator. Any questions on those?
Okay, 2B.
Item 2B. It's on behalf of the IT department, request to amend the Warren County budget for 2023 in the amount of $130,637.58 to carry over funding appropriated in 2022 for ARPA technology needs authorized by the board in to move them to 2023. So this is an amount that was ARPA fund, part of ARPA funds from 2022 that we just need to move into 2023.
Okay, Supervisor Thomas, Supervisor Bruno on the second. Further discussion? Okay. Would you?
I'm sorry.
Would you like to go? No? We'll call a vote on it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries on 2B. 2C?
On 2C, this is for emergency services. Request to authorize a contract with Regroup Mass Notification for employee notification subscription agreement for a 3-year term. And this is a system, you know, the OEM just came out with their app for emergency notifications for the county. This would be a mass notification system for the employees of Warren County.
Motion to bring it to the floor. Supervisor Runyon, Supervisor Gerasi on the second discussion. Did this go through the proper procurement policy of the council? Okay. And there was a question that came up in committee at the time as well. Was there any redundancy here? Did the county have any IT capability of doing the same thing?
No, they don't. That's why we move forward with this.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Okay, we'll call 2C. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, items 2D and 2E are basically taken together. Request to create a assigned fund balance for account A 918. Assign sexual abuse lawsuits to authorize appropriation of funds in the amount of $250,000 from budget code A909. The general fund unappropriated surplus for the purpose of utilizing premium savings from 2023 budgeted insurance to fund account for future claims. And then the E is the request to amend the budget for 2023 in the amount of $250,000 to cover assigned sexual abuse lawsuits. So this is just taking the money that was in budget code A909 and transferring it to A918. So it's available if there are sexual abuse lawsuits.
Motion to bring it to the floor. Supervisor Thomas, Supervisor Runyon on second. Discussion. So,
Okay.
yeah, did you want to add to the?
I'm fine. That's
Okay. It's coming out of unassigned fund balance, but it says it's from the savings from what we're not spending on insurance.
yes, that's for what insurance.
Okay. Yes, Attorney.
Hopefully in two sentences. Our coverage was cheaper because we got less coverage, because less coverage was available for these types of claims going forward in the state of New York due to the changes of statute of limitations on Child Victim Act and Adult Victim Act legislation, meaning New York State has become less predictable for insurance companies. So therefore, this is the money that we saved by taking less coverage that we're hoping to start putting aside, if possible, on an annual basis, so we can almost self-insure on some of these claims if they happen in the future.
And Attorney Elman, this was all discussed under the review of the insurance coming through and decided that this was a proper course of action, correct?
In great detail, yes.
Thank you. Supervisor Bruno, then Supervisor Runyon.
The change in New York State requirements or what have you that you mentioned, did that increase, if you will, the opportunity, if that's the right word, for lawsuits to go forward?
Yep, the Child Victim Act and the Adult Survivor Act are two acts that canceled the statute of limitations as a bar to bringing actions. And as a result, one of the consequences was carriers either drastically increased the premiums going forward or have canceled that coverage entirely from their packages.
Thank you.
Supervisor Runyon.
I kind of remember that there was something up on the screen there and we talked about this already, but we just hadn't decided yet. Is that why we're doing it now?
I believe that's the case. Yes.
Sure, I can speak quickly to that. So what we were doing is we were waiting. When we did the budget for 2023, we budgeted our insurance premiums based on an estimate.
Mhm.
And then when we met with the insurance carrier and discussed the coverages that we had in place, we decided not to go with the excess liability because of, and that was the $250,000.
Right.
So rather than pay that premium, what we're requesting is that be put into an assigned fund balance. So there's net effective zero on the budget,
Right.
their numbers, but we had to wait until the insurance bill actually came, the actual bill
Okay.
came and was paid. So we know what departments had excess funding that we put in during the budget. So
Right.
this is moving that money out of those codes into and creating this assigned fund.
Thanks. I just remembered we did talk about that.
We
Yeah.
did.
Mhm. Very good. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question for, do we get a motion for D and E?
Yes.
Okay, so call for D and E. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 2F.
2F. So at the presentation by Glens Falls to merge the Greater Glens Falls Transit Authority with the Capital District Transit Authority, CDTA. Part of that request is that the county put forth an amount, provide an amount to the CDTA, which is equal to, and it kind of, we had an earlier discussion. This is the 25 cents, an additional tax for mortgages in the county of 25 cents per $100. And that's what they basically asked for. They asked for it in a number of different formats. 1/4 of 1% of the mortgage recording tax. We tried to determine what that amount was. I think we finally, through discussions this week with the treasurer and us and the county clerk, we've come to the point that they're basically asking for an additional tax that's authorized on on mortgage recordings of 25 cents per 100. That amounts to about, over the past few years, it's amounted to about $1.3 million. And if this merger goes forward, approved by us, that would be the amount we would be providing to the CDTA as part of the merger. Now, at the time, we've looked at some of the other counties who have done this, and they've used that additional tax authorization and want to keep this separate from the county attorney's discussion at the last at the personnel committee meeting, but it's basically the 1% mortgage recording tax plus the additional 25% that we are already charging. And that would probably mean that we would have to divert that additional tax to support this merger. And so that's what, that's, Tammy, anything else you wanted to add on that, or Mike?
The clarification, it's not 25%.
No, it's 0.25%.
0.25%. Yeah, 0.25%. Sorry about that. All right.
No, I think that was, well, we're already collecting a tax. We're already, it's already being recorded as revenue for Warren County. And has been. So
And we're using that amount.
we're
So
using that as revenue to offset other expenses today.
Yes, ma'am.
Maybe I can just clarify 2 points that I heard in the committee when I watched the video. One is we can't raise that 0.25%. That's what the statute provides. So the additional mortgage recording tax is 0.25%. The question is does the county continue to keep putting that in their general fund for use on an annual basis? This is an annual expense, not a one-time payment. Or does it get, with the Board of Supervisors approval, that equivalency, which is about $1.3 million, does that go to the CDTA? And the CDTA is not really asking for that. That's what the statute requires. So the core counties, and there was 4 when it was created, Rensselaer, Albany, Schenectady, and Saratoga, were all 4, I guess you call them the founding statutory members of the CDTA. They all pay that 0.25% additional recording to the CDTA as part of the funding mechanisms for those counties. Any other county that wants to join the CDTA has to pay according to that same formula under the statute. So it's not a negotiation, number one. Number two, I am unclear and uncertain of the ability of the city of Glens Falls to join the CDTA, absent the county agreeing to be a member county and contributing that 0.25% additional tax. So those were the 2 points I saw that there might have been a little ambiguity on. One, we can't raise it to cover it. 2, it's money that's already going in the general budget every year, general fund every year. 3, it's the number, and if the county's going to join. And yeah, 4, I mean, 4, obviously the others, what are the other options for the county to consider a way outside of CDTA, but that's a larger conversation, I'm sure.
So that they did make the comment in the presentation that, well, you can use additional county funds to offset that amount. And we could, but you still have to provide that statutory amount, as the county attorney said. So that whatever that amount is, that's what we would provide for the CDTA in this merger.
And it would change every year depending on the actual
And
revenue.
on the actual revenue.
So to summarize, then the 0.25% that was talked about in an earlier committee meeting is the 0.25% additional.
Correct.
Historically, we have always had this from at least 2008, if not into the 90s. And historically, we've always claimed it as revenue and have used it to fund our appropriations. So if we were to now rededicate these funds, it's $1.3 million, the county would have to find an equivalent revenue source. And which would probably be tax levy. Shy of any other miracles happening. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I believe that's correct.
So is that clear to the committee here? And the CDTA in Glens Falls Transportation is looking for action from the Warren County Board of Supervisors as soon as possible on this?
Yes, I believe so.
And so, yes, Supervisor Gerasi.
Also have to pay the tax or just the county?
No, that, there was definitely some, in the committee meeting that I watched online, there was definitely a little back and forth on that. The statute's clear. Warren County decides if they're going to opt into the program and become a member county of CDTA. And there's a legal issue in there that I'm not going to address today, but it's a foundational question that I still need to look into. But assuming that that gets resolved, the question is merely, is the Board of Supervisors going to approve this entry into CDTA or not? Now, there's a whole host of potential possibilities of what that means, what that looks like, what other options are, but that's not really what's in front of the committee today.
So to clarify a little bit more, so basically what we're talking about, I believe, is not what was presented as a merger between the GGFT and the CDTA. Actually, the question is, do we as a county want to opt in to become a supporting county of the CDTA, regardless of what.
And if that occurs, then that would enable the CDTA, I believe, to take over the assets of the Greater Glens Falls Transit District. They may be able to take over those assets outside of the county involvement, but Warren County will not be participating in the CDTA unless and until there's a passage of a resolution or a local law committing to them being a member and paying the required payments that are required. Yeah, it's all on the county.
Right. We'll start with members here. Supervisor Bruno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that we should move this forward and let the whole Board of Supervisors discuss this, decide upon it, have the mayor, whoever, come and make a presentation to the full board to explain the pros and cons of this to the full board. I think it's a good move, it's an important move when you consider the need for public transportation and other factors, not the least of which is the kind of sustainability or lack thereof of the GGFT for a number of reasons, personnel, equipment, you name it. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
You're welcome. Supervisor Thomas, did you have your hand up?
No, but I have a comment.
Okay.
I can see where this is beneficial to the county and to Glens Falls, Queensbury, Lake George. But frankly, as far as town of Stony Creek, I don't see what this does for the people of Stony Creek, other than it's just another expense that you add on to the list. You know, you got Eastfield that we help support, and you've got the sewer system and all the rest of it that we support. So it's just another expense to the people of town of Stony Creek with no real benefit.
Thank you. I'll extend privilege of the floor to other members of the board. Supervisor Merlino.
I think Frank almost hit on what I was questioning. I mean, did they give us, this committee or somebody, a plan of what they plan on doing? Are they gonna have a bus go through every town in Warren County? Especially the small towns like Stony Creek and Lake Luzerne. I'd love to have a bus come through, but they never were able to afford it. I don't know what their full plan is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Quarter
The,
is that 1.3 million out of that quarter that they get? Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
the amount would be
That's
over the last 2 years, it was about 1.3 million. This past year, I believe it was around 1.2 million. It was down a little. So that amount will fluctuate, but it's roughly around, and that in their presentation, they said to us, we assessed this as about $1 million. And they're based on what we've seen, that's probably correct. So it's roughly $1 million a year that this amount we would be obligated to provide CDTA. All they have committed to at this point in the merger with their proposed merger or subsuming GGFT, whatever that would be, is to just continue the existing transit routes. So they've said there won't be a reduction in any of the transit routes that currently exist under GGFT. And they would consider additional ones in the future, but no obligation to, as this takes effect, to add additional routes.
And I spent some time yesterday diving into this, a couple of hours. The CDTA is governed by a board of directors that are not elected officials that determine the best needs and requirements for CDTA. And it's that board that would make determinations as to what the future would look like for the CDTA in Warren County. But clearly there would be no requirement or obligation that a bus goes through every town.
So, yeah, one quick follow-up there, Supervisor Merlino.
Because the only reason is too, out of that 1 million or 1.2, the towns get a percentage of that too, so we're losing out on that part of the money.
Now, that's a different, if I could answer that, that's a different part. The entire tax for mortgage recording is 1.25% of every $100 on a filed mortgage. We're talking about that 0.25, that's in not the 1%, but the 0.25 part of the 1.25. The 0.5% that goes to the towns would be unchanged. That's something that goes through, I think, the treasurer's office, maybe quarterly or semi-annually. I don't know the dates on it. The state gets a piece, the county gets a quarter, and then there's this additional quarter that's over 1%. Instead of that coming to the county, that would go to the CDTA to fund Warren County's participation in this transit authority.
So for an example on that, Saratoga County added the additional 0.25% to their mortgage recording tax, and they added it as a CDTA tax. And that's how it's reflected in their budget. So we had already added that to ours previously.
Yeah, Supervisor Drossy, then Supervisor McGowan.
Does the $1 million a year get Warren County a seat on the board?
No,
Have we asked that question?
yes, and the representation was maybe possibly, as I understood it. But from looking at the statute, it's not clear to me how that works, given its defined number. I'm not an expert. I only, I didn't sleep at a Holiday Inn last night either. But I only started diving deep into the public authority law yesterday, and it's very specific in how those seats are assigned. Are there possibilities that the statute could be rewritten? Yes, but that would require the founding counties to be willing to, or the CDTA to be willing to support that kind of a change. Their total operating budget, I think, is around 125 million.
75 million.
175? 175 million. And we're talking about our contribution of 1.3 million. That's somewhere I'm again, math is, I went to law school for a reason, but that's definitely less than 1% of the total budget.
But that's, to clarify that a little bit, they did say it was 80 to 85% of the CDTA expenses are funded through grants and federal funding and state funding. They're basically the counties, the founding counties, and if we become one of the counties that participate, would pay just, it's roughly about a 15% expense of the entire system.
I would, again, and I apologize if I'm speaking out of turn, but I would gently ask the committee to consider maybe a workshop on this one particular topic. It would give my office a little time to prep, to reach out to CDTA, to ask some of the specific concerns and questions that I've heard. And maybe just have a more holistic conversation about this, because it's a big number. And, once you're in, I think it's kind of hard to get out.
Can't get off the bus. Supervisor McGowan, I extend the privilege of the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was at that meeting. It was a powerful presentation from the mayor and CDTA. One of the things I did ask is, how can we get up north further? Because I think the furthest trip right now goes to Bolton, and how we can open it up, because there's no I in teen here. The way it's set up now with Glens Falls Transit, you baby swipe and they just get your money. But the CDTA has a different carding system, and they're able to gather more information. So they're able to see if quicker, if they're able to add on, and if there's a need to go north, and how financially stable it is. And, because I brought up, hey, can we open up Warrensburg? In my opinion, Warrensburg, Bolt Landing are about the same distance, and then it's a hip stop, Johnsburg, Chestertown. So, or kind of for all of us. So, it is a lot of money, but there's a lot that has to, I think, be worked out. But the city of Glens Falls is also a contributor.
I think the attorney's suggestion of a workshop is good, because what we are looking at here is diverting a traditional revenue stream to our budget, $1.3 million, onto a new expense. And how would we make that up? So we need to look at this more holistically. I think in general, there is a favor to consolidate and have CDTA. There's a lot of advantages. Supervisor Gerasi.
Is there a critical date, excuse me, that we need to have a response by before they can move forward?
They didn't ask for a specific date in the presentation, but I think they were expecting us to bring this before the board probably in March. But I don't think that there's a set. I could follow back up. It's the current director of GGFT is going to retire. That's a concern, and I believe that occurs sometimes in April. So they were hoping to have something done, action taken by then, rather than having to replace that person, Scott, you mentioned.
What's the committee's pleasure? Act on this now, deferred for further discussion on workshop.
Workshop.
Okay, is that the consensus of the committee? Okay. How do we go forward with that idea?
So we'd need a motion, and then I believe we'll schedule a separate time to do that. It'll
Okay.
be an offline meeting.
Making a motion to
Oh,
defer this to a workshop to be scheduled.
okay. The first by Supervisor Bruno, second by Supervisor Gerasi. Further discussion on the motion to move this to a
Just to
Workshop.
You
clarify
can clarify whether you want a workshop
for the entire
for
board,
the entire board,
or
for
at
the
least,
committee.
at least inviting the entire board in.
I agree with that,
I think
Yeah.
that's a good idea.
it's a significant action.
but also want maybe the mayor, in other words, people who can speak to the particular.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because what we would want to avoid is showing up on a Friday morning at 10 o'clock, even though it's come out of our esteemed committee here, but having 13 others going, we know nothing about this.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so we'll bring everybody, so we'll put it onto the lap for further organization. We have the motion to do so. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On to number 3, referrals from the county facilities. No,
We did.
geez, where am I? 4. No, I'm waiting for a new pair of glasses. So this comes from probation and is a request to amend the budget in the amount of 23,000 to reflect a receipt of funding from the Warren County Youth Bureau Alternative Sentencing in connection with Rural Communities Practice Phase 3 grant. This has been an ongoing grant. Motion to bring to the floor. Supervisor Drossy, Supervisor Runyon on the second. Discussion. Hearing none, call the question for 4A. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? None. Motion carries. On to 4B. It's a request to amend the budget of 2023 in the amount of $300,000 to raise the age revenue to pay for temporary jail placement of adolescent officers. So motion to bring this to the floor for discussion. Supervisor Runyon, Supervisor Frazier on the second. And I had asked Deputy Administrator on this one. This does get reimbursed. It's a reimbursement. So there's no other need for finding a funding source to fund that $300,000. We will bill, or probation would bill the DSS for those services. So we have a first and a second, correct? Any further discussion? Okay, for B, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? None. Motion carries. Then from the public defender, request to amend the budget in the amount of $96,153. This is to reflect the receipt of a year 4 Earl Herring grant funding to cover the cost of salary and benefits for the position of public defender number 10. Bring it to the floor. Supervisor Drossy, second Supervisor Thomas. Discussion? Hearing none, call the question for 4C. All those in favor say aye. And opposed? None. Motion carries. On to number 5, referrals from Economic Growth and Development Committee and Planning Community Development. We have 2 requests. The first is a request to amend the budget of $66,040, and it's to amend the revenue codes to reflect the receipt of ARPA administrative funding per the resolution of 2022. Motion to bring it to the floor. Thank you, Supervisor Runyon, Supervisor Frazier on the second. Discussion? Closed discussion. All those in favor of 5A, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 5B is to appropriate funds in the amount of $200,000 from the general fund unappropriated surplus to the planning contracts. This is a carryover of funding that was appropriated in 2022, and it's to cover the cost of the county comprehensive strategic plan. Motion to bring it to the floor. Supervisor Thomas and Supervisor Runyon on the second. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of 5B say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. 5C is from Workforce Development, and this is a request to amend the budget in the amount of $100,000 to include Warren County's investment into workforce development programs and services for residents and county employees. Motion to bring it to the floor. Supervisor Frazier with Supervisor Runyon on the second. This was something that was included in our budget. Is that correct? Somehow we're amending, but there was.
So the money was put into, what is in the 2023 budget. Now we're just taking it and allocating it to the correct accounts that'll be used by workforce development. They would have by that.
That's right. Is that clear? Okay, so any further discussion? We'll call for 5C. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? 5C carries. On to 6, this is referral from Health Services Committee and Public Health, and it's a request to amend the budget in the amount of $675,621. And this reflects the balance of the LLC school grant contract. Motion to bring it to the floor, Supervisor Frazier, second by Supervisor Runyon. Discussion. And again, this is just to recognize grant revenue.
Mhm.
Any further discussion? Vote on item 6. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move to item 7. This is referrals from Human Services Committee. The first one is to amend the budget in the amount of $15,000. And this is to increase expense and revenue based on the need to create a new memorandum of understanding with the sheriff's office to cover the transportation costs for individuals in the care and custody of the Department of Social Services. Motion to bring it to the floor. Supervisor Bruno, Supervisor Runyon on the second. Discussion. And if I'm correct on listening to that committee, the sheriff's been doing this, and now we're just formalizing that there is a value to that service. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of 7A, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. 7B is a request to amend the budget in the amount of $114,564 and to increase expenses and revenue based on the remaining allocation received by the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance with things attached there, rental assistance qualified individuals. Motion to bring it to the floor. Supervisor Runyon with Supervisor Bruno on second. Any further discussion on this one? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote on 7B. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We move on to item 8, referrals from Legislative Rules and Government Ops. We have 3 from the Board of Elections. The first 2, 8A is a request to appropriate funds in the amount of $29,100 from reserve election equipment to the Board of Elections to cover costs of purchasing supplies. And I was wondering if we could fold in B, request to appropriate funds of $43,718 from reserve election equipment to the Board of Elections to cover the cost of Dominion voting machine lease. With consent, okay, so moved by Supervisor Bruno, who's on Supervisor Runyon on a second. Discussion. So,
This is on A,
on 8,
A and B.
Yes.
would you rather that they were separated?
Yes,
Supervisor
because I'm
Thomas?
opposed to B.
Okay, so if it's okay to amend, I guess amend that resolution just to include 8A.
Mhm.
Is that okay with the first and second? Okay, so we'll just consider 8A here, and this is to cover the cost of purchasing supplies. There's no discussion. We'll call for 8A. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. We'll go to 8B. And this is a request to appropriate the funds for to cover the cost of Dominion voting machine lease coming out of our reserve. Motion to bring it to the floor. Supervisor Drossy, Supervisor Frazier on second. Discussion. So
I don't trust these electronic machines, and I never really have, and the more I hear about them, I don't think we should be using them.
What's the alternative?
may I ask, yes, so.
What's the alternative?
I think we should go back to a paper ballot and hand count them.
And when I first voted, we had those great little voting machines and the lots close behind you and you flick the little levers. What were those? Those were somewhat automated, but
Yeah, they
What
were,
you're talking about?
well, they were mechanical,
mechanical, right? Click, click.
but they can't be
Can't be messed with.
interfered with from
Mhm.
all parts of the world, shall I say.
Put that lever and it prints out. Take behind there and at the end, you just read it off and pull that out and read
Yeah, I thought they
the
worked pretty
number
good.
of both checks for each category.
Or paper ballots, because you know, you take like France, and most of the European countries, Germany, they all do paper ballots. They vote on paper and they count their ballots and they're done counting by, you know, midnight. 12 o'clock, everybody knows the results. You know, if there's an issue, okay, you go back and you count them again.
Which is what you do now, except that you insert the paper ballot in the machine. So,
Yeah.
so you just take the machine out of it.
But the machines end up, you know, being
I'm saying,
being manipulated.
it's a
That's,
paper ballot,
I
so.
think that's the problem.
Are you talking algorithms?
So,
Yeah,
Right.
among other things.
I agree with you, Frank.
So, you know, I just want honest elections.
Yeah.
further discussion on 8B? Call the question. All those in favor say aye. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Supervisor
My,
Runyon?
my question was, are we already in this lease? Are we already committed to this? Or is this new
Yes.
that we renew it
We have
every year?
them, we have the Dominion machines and these are the yearly.
So would we be breaking our lease if we didn't do this?
We would have to find an alternative way to do.
Because we already have paper ballots. They go into that machine, but maybe there's a way that we could also do what you want and count them. My town's small. I can count them.
Mine too, yeah.
In fact, I know all the people.
No.
I already know how they're voting before they come in.
Okay. Mr. Administrator, were you?
No, as far as I know, these are the machines they are using now. So this just extends the lease.
We'll call the question for 8B. All those in favor say aye.
I
guess
And
I
opposed?
don't have a choice.
We have
would say they.
One opposition.
I think
On to 8C, request to amend the budget in the amount of $22,620.96 to carry over unused grant funding. Supervisor Drossy on the first, Supervisor Runyon on a second. Discussion? No discussion. Vote on the question. All those in favor of 8C, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. That's right. Quiet in the committee room. Thank you. Number 9, referral from the Occupancy Tax Coordination Committee. Request to appropriate funds in the amount of $26,386.54 from the Occupancy Tax Reserve to cover the cost for 2 initiatives approved in the December 16th board meeting. Do we want to do B as well on this one?
Yeah.
The appropriate funds in the amount of $750,000 from the reserve to various budget codes to cover costs of occupancy tax requests that have been approved.
Mhm.
Okay, we'll do, who would like to bring A and B to the floor? Supervisor Bruno, Supervisor Runyon on the second for 9A and B. Discussion. Hearing none, call the question. Vote on 9's A and B. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Number 10, referrals from Public Works Committee. We have A and B here are both to establish capital projects. Would we like to do all and C and D are also to increase capital projects? Would we like to bring those two pairs? Okay, so and let's do 10A and B. We have a first by Supervisor Runyon and a second. Supervisor Thomas, we're requesting to establish capital projects culvert assessment in the amount of $82,650 and establish capital project Adirondack Bridge and Beaver Pond Road replacement for $440,307. Discussion? Let's vote on 10A and B. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries for 10A and B. 10C and D, request to increase capital project 393 Johnsburg Bridge in the amount of $2,825,003 and the request to increase capital project number 322 Palisade Road in the town of Horkin in the amount of $461,308. Motion bring those two to the floor. Supervisor Runyon, Supervisor Gerasi, further discussion? Hearing none, let's vote on 10C and D. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries for 10C and D. Okay, number 11, these are coming out of personnel agenda. I'll look for the clerk. Are all of these, did these all pass?
Yes, and then we have an additional item for the county attorney position. There a form transfer of funds from the contingent account to cover that increase in the salary.
Okay,
So we need to add that to the agenda as well.
okay. So let's begin here from our personnel agendas and personnel agenda item 3A, which was a request to amend the table of organization and to increase the salary of legal office coordinator position of 60,064 to 65,942 effective March 20th, 2023. Motion to bring it to the floor. Supervisor Runyon, Supervisor Thomas on the second. Discussion. Hearing no discussion, let's vote on it. All those in favor of 3A, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. From the personnel agenda item 4. These were all with EMS, A, B, and C. Can we do these as one motion? Supervisor Gerasi on a first, Supervisor Runyon on a second. Any questions on 4A, B, and C? Hearing none, let's vote on those. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries for 4A, B, and C. On to public defender, which would be 4D and E. It's a request to amend the table of organization to decrease the salary of public defender from 73,116 to 71,015, effective March 20th. And on E to amend the table of org to create and fill the position of Assistant County Defender 10 with the annual salary of 71,015.
Motion move D and E.
Okay, motion moved D and E. Supervisor Bruno on the second. Discussion? No discussion. We'll close and vote on items 4D and E. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 5, referral from Human Services Committee, Department of Social Services. Request to amend table of organizational salary schedule to create and fill a new position of Assistant Social Service Attorney, part-time. And this, did this come with a term?
Yeah, this one, they amended it so that there would be it was 60 days.
60 days after.
The full-time position that's vacant was filled.
Thank you. Is that understood by the committee?
Yeah.
Motion to bring that to the floor then. Supervisor Runyon, Supervisor Thomas on the second. Discussion? Call the question. All those in favor of item 5, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. Now what is it?
Okay, so there's
Number 10, this one here.
this one, yeah, the transfer of funds from the contingent account to cover the cost of that salary increase for the county attorney's position that the salary was increased for.
Okay. Motion to bring that to the floor. You all have this one standalone resolution there. Who'd like to bring that to the floor? Supervisor Frazier. Is there a second? Supervisor Runyon on the second. Discussion. Always hate dipping into the contingent fund and things. Attorney Elman, no fines or anything you could bring into the coffers to cover this?
We don't get to fine.
So. Okay. Any other questions from the board, from the committee? Hearing none, then we will vote on this resolution request of transfer of funds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. Pending items, joint meeting personnel administration hire finance scheduled. County Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just for your information, we have a meeting coming up next week with the chair of the Finance Committee, the chairman of the Board of Supervisors, and the chairman of the Budget Committee the joint meeting with Washington County. The treasurer will attend as well. And we're going to discuss the funding request. If you recall, it's that taking our funding support for SUNY Adirondack to 15% over a 5 or 6 year period. And we need to come to some agreement with Washington County before we come back for a discussion about that. And once we have that discussion next week, we'll be prepared to set up, schedule a meeting, joint meeting of personnel and higher education finance committee to discuss that.
Dan, thank you, Mr. Administrator. Any questions for the administrator on that? Privilege of the floor, public comment. Anybody like to speak? Hearing none, accept a motion to adjourn. Supervisor Drossy, Supervisor Bruno, all those in favor say aye.